My name is Jong-Woo Han. I am the president of Korean War Legacy Foundation, which has more than 1,500 Korean War veterans interviewed. This whole interview, Wilsonville, arranged by the Honorary Consul Greg Caldwell. So I want to thank him. Pleasure and honor to meet you, sir. And please introduce yourself. What is your name, sir?
Burnie Samuel Jarvis, Jr.
Could you spell it?
Burnell, Samuel, Samuel, Jarvis, Jarvis, Jr.
Right. What is your birthday, sir?
June 8th, 1930.
1930. So that makes you
92.
92?
Yes, sir.
Wow, you look so young.
Looks can be deceiving.
You just had a birthday.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you put a little bit of yes, so that we can have your full face.
Okay.
Where were you born?
I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Salt Lake City. And tell me about your family background when you were growing up, your parents and your siblings, please.
Well, I was born a mechanic. My father was an auto mechanic. And when I was growing up, I was always interested in mechanical things. And I enjoyed that. And I have a brother who was 2 years younger than me, and a sister who is 9 years younger than me. And I grew up during the Depression, and so life was not hard for me. My father always was able to work, but many who lived in the neighborhood couldn't find work, and it was a very difficult time.
Great Depression.
Great, oh yes, very bad.
Yeah, very bad. And tell me about your educational background. When did you graduate? What high school?
I graduated from high school in 1948, South High School in Salt Lake City.
And what did you do after that?
While I was in high school, I worked at a gas station, and when I graduated from high school, my father asked me, what are you going to do now? And I told him, I said, I guess I'll go to work on cars. And he said, over my dead body.
Why?
In those days, you didn't ask the why. But since I have come to realize that it was a great help to me, for me to search other entities, and I went to work for the railroad, and I was a machinist apprentice, but about the fall of that year, my friend that I completely went through school with called me up, and he said he went down to the Navy and checked up on, and he said that we could go in the Navy, and if we went in the Navy together, we'd stay together. We went in the Navy together. He went to East Coast, I went to West Coast. And after I got out of boot camp, I was assigned to a heavy cruiser ship. It's a very large ship.
Which one?
USS St. Paul.
St. Paul.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
what kind of ship was it?
heavy cruiser. Heavy cruiser, yeah.
What does that mean?
It was, the only thing larger was the battleship. The battleship has 16-inch guns, the main guns. The heavy cruiser had 8-inch guns, as well as 6-inch and anti-aircraft batteries. But after serving the year, I decided the Navy was not going to be my career. So I got out and went back to work for the railroad. And then after the Korean War got started, I got a letter from Uncle Sam, we need you. So I was recalled in 1950,
Yeah.
and I went to San Francisco, and then to Honolulu, and then to Tokyo, and that's where I met the ship USS Toledo, which is a sister ship of the one I was on first.
USS what?
Toledo.
Okay. T-O.
Ledo, Toledo,
Yeah.
named after, which is the same configuration. And our assignment was to be the help out artillery, because our 8-inch guns could send a projectile 25 miles with very good accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
And we were breaking up roads, railroads, bridges, and somehow the military would get a spotter, because we were always 10 miles north of where the action was, and we were anchored most of the time in a harbor or a mouth of a river, and the spotter would call over, and he had a map and a radio and binoculars, and he would send the coordinates of where he wanted to some action.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be sometimes during the day, sometimes during the night. And one of his favorite things was he would find a building or a place where the troops were sleeping. Sometime in the middle of the night, he would put a projectile in the middle. Didn't turn out well for them.
Mm. So, before we go more details about your service, when you graduated South High School in 1948, did you learn anything about Korea from the school? Did you know anything about Korea?
No. In fact, while I was in school, I took ROTC, which was pre-military training, but there was nothing about Korea or the country at all.
Not at all?
Not that I recall. I was a poor student. For English and geography, I had to be nice to the teacher to get by.
Pass.
To pass, yes, that's correct, to pass.
So when did you leave for Korea from where? You said San Francisco, right?
San Francisco.
When was it?
It was August or late August or September. And then 1950, and they flew us from there to Honolulu, and we stayed there for probably 2 weeks to get another flight to Tokyo. And so then we went there, and then we were put in barracks there in Sasebo, waiting for our ship to come in to get on the ship.
Your ship meaning USS Toledo.
Toledo, yeah.
Toledo.
Yeah.
And what was your specialty? You were in the artillery, right?
I was on the deck force, and we were in a gunnery division, and I was underneath a 5-inch twin mount gun mount.
And what was your rank at the time?
A seaman first class.
Seaman first class.
And because I had already decided that the military was not going to be my career, I didn't pursue any, because I was just going to get out and pursue other things.
So you were 20 at the time, right? 20 or
Yes.
You were not married at the
No,
time?
no.
You didn't have a girlfriend?
Well, I'd had some, but no, not really.
Not really?
No.
Serious?
Serious.
Okay.
No.
So tell me about, from Sasebo you went to Korea, right?
Yes.
East Sea.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether It was on the east side. I suppose that it's probably on the east side.
Yeah.
And I really wasn't aware of any exact locations, but I always knew that because they told us that we were about 10 miles north of where the action was. And that's really all we knew, and we were anchored in a bay or a mouth of a river, and it was that way for a couple of weeks at a time.
Right. And do you remember any special action from the ship USS Toledo to like bomb the North Korean shore or anything?
No.
Any action? Any more action?
There, we did get some small arms fire from the shore one time.
One time.
It was right after lunch, and we were anchored, and here was splashes in the water, and but it didn't make it to us. It was maybe 2/3 of the way from the shore to us. So
it was enemy fire.
Enemy fire, yes, it was enemy fire, and so they sounded general quarters. They cut the anchor loose because it would take too long to bring it back.
Right.
And they, with the 5-inch guns and the 20 millimeters, we started firing. From, because there were six 5-inch gun mounts on the ship, but 4 were able to bear on where the small fire was coming from.
Yeah.
And it probably lasted maybe not more than 10 minutes or so.
That's it.
Well, because we got out of there. And so about a week and a half or maybe 2 later, we came back. And obviously we must have had a diver on the ship. Every time they put an anchor down, it had a float on it so that we knew exactly where it was. He went down and hooked it up, and we retrieved the anchor. And before everything happened, from the shore was all very green, lush trees, all empty. When we come back, there wasn't a stick standing. And the captain was upset because we had expended a lot of ammunition.
Right.
But we were just loading it all out.
Any other episode?
No.
No enemy ship?
We never. Well, we had occasionally, maybe 2 or 3 times, was a South Korean junk. I don't know, but no, they were bringing prisoners.
Oh.
They brought some prisoners out to the ship, and that was the only time that we ever saw them. And a year ago, there were 4 South Korean soldiers who had come to this country and were at the meeting for Memorial Day. I took the occasion to talk to them, and I told them that their Navy was pathetic.
Yeah. So mostly we overpowered the enemy Navy, right? There was not much resistance from the North Korea.
Oh, yeah. We never saw any opposition at all.
The U.S. forces were dominant.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that you didn't have much action like a round ball, you know?
No. We never saw any enemy activity at all.
So what was your main mission? I mean, without engaging in enemy ship, and what was your mission mostly?
Well, it was to provide artillery for whatever the spotter would locate. And even during the winter, the winters there were pretty cold, and we were even breaking up ice on rivers so they couldn't get across the rivers to resupply from the north for their troops.
Mm-hmm. So you've been bombarding the enemy area from the sea.
Yes.
You didn't encounter enemy ship and engage in battle.
Yeah, we never saw any enemy ships or anything.
How often did you bomb to the shore of enemy area?
Quite frequently. In fact, we had 3 turrets, and each turret had 3 barrels, and at one point, all of the barrels were worn out, and when they would fire a projectile, it has a tracer in it. And early on, while the tracers were true and straight, but it got so that the tracers were this way, and so we ended up going back to Honolulu to get the barrels changed to come back, and we did that as quickly as possible.
You had to go back to Hawaii?
To Hawaii.
Wow.
I guess that was the only place that we could get to a facility that we could get the new barrels.
Oh.
The barrels are large, and
How long did it take to get to the
I
Hawaii?
I don't recall, but
like a week?
I have no idea, but I do know that it was that's what happened. But then after we got the new barrels, everything was lovely again.
Wow. And so there was not many dangerous moments.
No, there was.
Been killed?
No.
No.
When we loaded ammunition for the 8-inch, the projectiles were so large that they had to be handled with a hand truck. The 5-inch projectiles, we could pick them up and carry them off. And the powder for the 8-inch was in bags, so we could pick them up and carry them off. And the 5-inch were in brass, and they'd come in cans, and like that. And occasionally we had to go out. We had to go out to sea, to go to a freighter to reload ammunition, and for food, and for fuel. And occasionally, not very often, I would say quite rare, we would go out and operate with an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
And when they would launch aircraft or retrieve aircraft, they would go what they call flank speed, like 35 knots, which is over 40 miles an hour. And for large ships, that's a lot. And our ship, when we would go like that, the whole ship would vibrate. And if they made a 90-degree turn, it would take 5 miles.
Wow.
Just to turn, make a 90-degree turn.
It's big.
Big.
Yeah.
And there were probably, on our ship, were probably 1,500 men.
1,500?
And yes, and we had a dentist and a doctor and an accounting office. You know, it's like a city. I mean, that's a lot of people.
Yeah. How big was it? How is the length? Do you remember?
It was very long. I don't recall, but it was very large.
So there were around 1,500 people.
1,500 men.
Tell me about the life in the USS Toledo. How was it? I mean, what did you eat? Where did you sleep?
Well,
how many hours did you work per day? Things like that. Were you able to watch movie there? What is it like to be in there?
They had a galley there and cooks and bakers, and they were very, very good.
What did you eat?
Oh, whatever they fixed. Well,
what was your favorite menu?
Well, I don't know that I had a favorite menu, but there were occasionally when the food was getting low and we had trouble getting to a supply ship, they would have...
you had to fish?
No, we didn't have to fish, but they had... I don't know what you call it, but it was just like hash for several days in a row.
For a few days.
And we always, after we were at a supply ship, we would get a few fresh, like apples or oranges, and maybe some fresh milk. But other than that, it was powdered milk, powdered eggs, and...
But you had a hot meal.
Oh, yes.
All the time.
All the time. That was the nice thing about being in the Navy.
Exactly.
I had a nice dry place to sleep, and I didn't have anybody shooting at me. And we had good meals, and we stood watches 24/7 every 4 hours, and then the midnight watch, you got a sandwich that was for, we called it heartburn sandwich. It was spam animal.
Yeah, spam.
Yeah.
I love spam.
You wouldn't like it the way that they'd slice it and fry it, put it between two pieces of bread, and that was your sandwich. But a few times, a cook would be standing watch with us, and so he'd say, "Let me go down," and he'd come back with steak sandwiches. And then when the guys that were up in the upper part of the mountain, they said, "Hey, somebody smells it. What do you have?" We didn't tell them.
So compared to the Army who had to eat sea ration.
Well, in the Army or the Marines, you lived in a foxhole.
Exactly.
And somebody shooting at you, and that's the way it was. So I was very well off in that department.
And lucky.
Very fortunate.
Very fortunate.
Very fortunate.
Right. And were you able to write letters back to your family?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we, whenever we went to the supply ship of whatever, either for fuel or food, or they would generally have mail because it went through San Francisco, and then they would get it to us through the supply train, and so then we would get mail and it was maybe every week or 10 days. It would go out the same way.
Do you have still those letters?
No.
No. Once you are in the ocean, how long was it and to return to Sasebo?
Oh, well, it was almost 2 years.
No. Were you always in the ocean?
Yes, yeah.
You never returned to the base? Or?
No. The only time we left was when we went to Honolulu.
Honolulu for the barrels.
For the barrels replaced. Other than that, we were there and we were busy with the war.
So how did you refuel your ship, and what about the food? How do they provide you?
We had a tanker ship that would show up every once in a while, and we would go out and they have what they call a high line. We'd rig up a high line and then bring the hose over, and they would pump the fuel over to us, and that's the way it worked. The same way with the ammunition and food, exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. So when did you go back to, finish your service as a Korean War veteran? When was it?
It was like October, November of '52. And I got discharged then.
52 discharged.
1952.
Yeah. Have you been back to Korea since then?
No.
You never been?
I was never on the shore.
Right.
When I met with Greg, he says, "Were you in the military?" "Yeah." And he says, "What part of what cities?" I wasn't in any cities. Well, then what? He says, I was in the Navy on a ship. Well, he asked me, I'm a veteran, and then he asked me all these other questions. And then he said, "Well, you're still a veteran, even though I was never on the shore."
Oh, yeah, you were Navy.
Yeah.
Very important to guard the whole thing and supportive of Army and Marine actions in the...
Yeah.
So you never been invited back to visit Korea?
No.
What, do you know anything about Korea now?
The very nice thing, and you probably know, that the country of South Korea, they gave me this medal.
The Peace Ambassador Medal.
Yes. And they called me a hero. I'm not a hero. But they also gave me, are you familiar with the book that they produced? I have the book.
Yep.
And the first part of the book tells about the war. And then the middle part tells the transition after, and then the last part tells about how it's flourished. And I've been through the meetings and things. I've met several people from South Korea. They all treat me very, very nicely. And they tell me that, well, a year ago when we met with some dignitaries from South Korea, and they asked Chuck Lasardi, who you will meet, they asked him, how do you feel about the war? How did you feel about being involved in it? I really had never thought of it that way, but in thinking about it, I thought, well, there were two great important things to me about it. To preserve the country, because they were almost overrun. They could have lost the whole country through North Korea. And the other part is preserving freedom. That's very important to me.
Absolutely. So Korea is now 10th largest economy in the world.
Yep.
Amazing.
It
Amazing.
is. It is.
And one of the most substantive democracy in East Asia. What do you think about this whole change? Korea was really, really poor at the time when you were there in 1950.
Absolutely. Well, they were being destroyed. And the fact is that if through the United Nations that we hadn't showed up, it would have been over.
Exactly.
I mean, it would have been gone. And they would have been under the rule of the North of communism, which is not good.
Right. And that's the legacy of your whole service as a Korean War veteran.
Exactly.
You're saying that you are not hero, but if you look at the whole trajectories of the Korean history in its relations with the United States, you are the Korean War veterans that actually transform the relationship into now. So you are the hero.
But I was glad I served my country.
Yep.
Because it taught me a lot of things and a great appreciation for my country.
Absolutely. How much were you paid at the time? Your salary, annual salary.
Oh, I thought about bringing my discharge paper because it said that, but it was very minimal. And we figured out that we got paid pennies per hour. Because we were there 24 hours, but we had free medical services, dental services. In fact, I got my wisdom teeth out in the service. Free.
Free. Yeah. So what is the impact of your service as a Korean War veteran in your life after you came back from Korea?
Well, after I came back from Korea, I had GI Bill, and I went to aviation mechanic school. And so I'm a federally licensed aviation mechanic. In fact, I brought a picture to show you. After I got through school, I got a job at a place that operated helicopters.
Ericsson?
Ericsson Aircrane was the company I retired from.
Hold it?
Yeah.
To show the camera. Yes.
And the backside. And this helicopter here will lift 10 ton. This one will lift at least 12.5 ton.
So you got the GI Bill and you were trained to do this operation?
Well, I was trained to be an aircraft mechanic, and then I went to work at the place that operated helicopters. So most of my career I worked on helicopters, but I worked for United Airlines for a little while. I worked on some fixed wing. Fixed wing are much easier to work on than helicopters because helicopters, everything moves. Fixed wing, nothing moves.
Legacy Foundation, my foundation, published in 2019
Oh.
because still we call the Korean War as forgotten war, right?
Yes, I'm very familiar with that. A lot of people
yes, and
talk about that, and as I understand it, through being in the group, they talk. A lot of the schools don't even mention it.
Right.
It's taken out, which is a shame because it was a key part of world happenings.
Yeah. So that's why we are trying to do this interview. And that curriculum book that you have is all based on the analysis of the Korean War veterans interview of more than 1,500 that we have. So this is the 3-lesson plan for elementary school teacher, 3-lesson plan for middle school, and another 3 for high school, so that teachers can use this curriculum book when they talk about the Korean War, but it's all based on the analysis of the interviews. So it's not about the history book, it's about the witness book.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So please let people know. I want to give it to you.
Thank you.
As a gift to you, sir.
Thank you. I would be glad to read it and share it.
Yes, please. And let your family, and if you know of any history teacher, please share that with them and let me know if they're interested in knowing more about my foundation.
Oh, well, surely.
Yes. What would you say about your experience as a Korean War veteran? What do you think?
Well,
What is the legacy of it?
I was really glad to be a part of it, and for the reasons that I already told you, and that, to me it was very important for the freedom of the people and for their freedom and the way the country has developed itself and turned out to be a great partner of our country.
Excellent. Burnie, I want to thank you for your honorable service as a Korean War veteran, really. And you are one of those Korean War veterans who transformed the whole relationship between US and Korea and contributed to make Korea what it is right now. So I want to thank you, sir.
Well, my pleasure. I'm glad I took the opportunity.